You were talking about passing on the best of Baba culture.
Yeah. Well, the culture comes from the wisdom and or decisions based upon ideals that are based upon the wisdom, and the wisdom comes between this shared experiences and these sort of authentic experiences. They're often agreed upon sort of generally accepted norms, the sort of the cream of our society. And the idea is that we would want to pass that on, the best of what.
See, I misunderstood.
Yeah, the best of the Meher Baba sort of our collective experiences.
Let me say what I
Yeah.
said when we were off camera, and that is that I think I had not understood you, and it's hard to understand because the word culture is a very difficult term. And first of all, it has at least three meanings in the context of what we're talking about. First of all, you have the counterculture, which is anti-culture, which is what we inherited from the Baba lords, basically. But then you have a positive sense of the Baba culture.
Yeah.
And then you have the world, which is kind of a sick society culture. And then you also have culture, which is the inherited Christian Western tradition culture, with the rule of law and all kinds of good things and some bad things, some common heroes and myths and history. And religion. Religious views.
So I was speaking to
But-
our collective.
The
Meher
Baba
Baba
one.
culture. Yeah, I was speaking
See,
to our-
no, I didn't
Yeah.
understand.
I was speaking about our collective Meher Baba culture, and that in that willingness, that desire to sort of there's a real sense of whether the physical culture, whether we're going to archive, there's a lot of energy going into archive things. There's not that much energy into taking our existing culture and mentoring and transmitting that to the young.
Christina Riley,
Yeah.
who's my age and
Yeah.
has similar background to us, growing up in the Baba community with a famous father,
Yeah.
says the same thing.
Yeah.
Too much emphasis on archiving.
A lot of emphasis on archiving. I mean, people come.
I think it's important work, though.
Yeah, and I'm not taking away
The important work.
the importance or any of the hard work or love or devotion from any of these things. Think of it like this, Chris. It's like a big piece of the pie. You need all the kind of pieces together to fit, and they all have a slot to fit in. And the physical preservation.
Maybe that was largely the role of the first wave of Baba lovers after Baba dropped his body, was to do that because it was needed work.
Absolutely.
I think Christina even thinks that
Yeah.
it was kind of like that's what they were supposed to do, and they did it, but maybe not really much beyond that.
And so what I was speaking to in that meeting was if you're concerned about AI taking over, you're concerned about it becoming a religion, well, the best way for that not to happen is so that people understand who they are and where they come
Okay,
from.
well,
They understand
I think,
what it
let me
is.
correct my understanding.
have that
then.
foundation.
Let me
Yeah.
say what then, you mentioned Russia
Yeah,
in the context, not that we should adopt Orthodox Christian culture.
Yeah.
It's that they are trying to revive and save and preserve and give to the young the best of their culture. And so you're using that as a parallel to our Baba culture. That we need to do that with our young. Not that we need to give them that culture, that Western tradition.
no, I was-
But our Baba culture.
well,
The best of it.
I was
What's
using that
good
as an
of it.
example of what it is to, Russia, as you and I both know,
Yeah.
is that, in the early 90s, you had the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And you had close to 1 million people die. You had from starvation and people losing their money.
The 90s was a horrible
It was a horrible time. It was a horrible time, and you had the Soviet Union, NATO move into post-Soviet
They lost like half their population,
They lost a lot of population.
to the countries,
Yes.
the satellites.
And it was a very destructive time.
Leaving.
But what was interesting was that, you also had a period of where people were specifically encouraged not to participate in a particular faith. And then
Christianity,
Christianity,
which is unique,
Orthodox
which is
Christianity.
really actually maybe even
Yeah.
unique to history.
Or even within Russia, even the forms of Islam that exist within Russia. And so when you saw
and Buddhism.
yeah, and Buddhism too,
Which is
so,
in the east of Russia.
So when you saw someone like Vladimir Putin
Mhm.
take over, it was no accident when Vladimir Putin take over. I gave a little talk at one point during a security committee of the center, and I was talking about how Vladimir Putin functioned in the concept of the onion. Basically, when Vladimir was first of all, just a little background on who he is. He was, he lost. Well, I'll just say that his family goes deep into the culture of Russia. His grandfather was the cook of Stalin, basically, and his parents. So he had to be a very trustworthy man.
Mhm.
He lost his brother, and he lost, I believe it was an uncle during World War II. Real devastation happened with most Russians during.
You're talking
World War
about
II.
his Putin's uncle.
Putin's uncle. He lost a substantial amount of his family, but they were very loyal people in terms of their devotion to the nation of Russia. So when Putin was a young man, whatever, he was one of those guys who didn't go straight into the communist youth when he was young. He was sort of his own person, and he didn't want to necessarily.
He was rebellious.
He was rebellious,
Yeah.
and he sort of wanted to figure out who he was.
Mhm.
And so he did. He took that time as a teenager. He went in much later on, I think the last year or two that you can enlist, and then eventually went on to law school and served, in the KGB in East Germany and so forth. Learned German language, very high IQ, very bright, very sophisticated. But one thing that he got involved in was counterintelligence. And he understood, and the people he was involved in understood that the greatest threat to Russia, because they had role-played this many, many, many times, was not necessarily an external nuclear threat. That it was probably going to be somewhere where, the ambassadors were slowly, the ambassadors who were serving in Switzerland and Italy and these sorts of people, the sort of oligarchs, or the nomenclatura is actually what the Soviets called it, this upper class of the society, the beneficiaries of communism system, would eventually be wooed and subdued by the West cosmopolitan lifestyle. And that's exactly what happened. And it eventually corroded the values enough so that the system, eventually people didn't believe in the system anymore. And once that had enough movement, everyone was like, this is a house of cards. So Vladimir understood that. And he wasn't necessarily married to the communist system, but he was definitely married to being pro-Russian. See, there was a difference. Countries take on different ideological views, but they often sustain the same culture. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that is you have an understanding of who you are and where you come from, what your values are.
But a huge part of
Yeah.
their culture was repressed.
It was repressed, but
The Christian.
the Christian, but it was still there. There was still a spark there within each of us.
It never really died.
It never really died. And so when he came to power, he realized that
On Christmas Eve, in front of a Christmas tree, and Boris Yeltsin, the video of Boris Yeltsin and calling him to the
yes.
White House, Russian White House.
I mean, this was a guy who, when East Germany was collapsing, there was a mob that ended up where he was stationed, because where he was also housing some very important documents, and he single-handedly came out with a pistol and basically said, you guys aren't getting this, and I'm gonna fight, but it would be wise to go home. And he diffused the situation. He was incredibly sophisticated and incredibly bright, and he understood what it was to be Russian. He had a good sense of self. And he had self-respect, he had love in his life, he had a wife, he had children, he had all these different things that helped to create and cement a foundation with him. And so when you saw that when he became president, he understood, how do I, in this incredibly corrupt, incredibly destructive system, how do I bring back the best of what Russia is so that people can have food on their table, that they can have jobs again? And we saw
and faith.
And faith. And we saw very quickly
And family.
that he understood how to do that. And he did, because he was part of a system that, and I used the example in my talk, where he was part of the onion, where you can eventually peel away, you can peel and peel and peel away to get to this hermetically sealed core inside of an onion, where you have a group of people who really know who they are and what's going on. And I said that was extremely important, whether that be for the Meher Center or for the Baba World, that it's very important to have a foundation, and that's how that culture can sustain itself, and continue even through great adversity. Now, I just want to say that, in my time overseas, and the people that I worked with, I worked with all different types of people. I worked with people, in everyone from NGOs to intelligence people to heads of state and so forth. And my experience was, at least in the quarters that I was involved with, that Vladimir Putin was, at that time, and this was, this has been for some time now, that he was the most admired and respected political figure in the world. Now, most Americans would be shocked. This even goes back 12, 13 years ago. Most Americans would be shocked to hear that, but outside of the United States, in a lot of these, call it non-NATO countries or not
that early that he was respected?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's even come out much more. And I think it was because of what he has done to rebuild his culture and to preserve that faith that those people had. And it's been a natural thing. It hasn't been, as the New York Times reports, some sort of a forced thing on the people. It's quite the opposite. It has very much come from the people. And you see this.
The allowance.
Yeah, you see this spiritual rebirth taking place in Russia. So when I brought that up, it was like, guys, everyone's talking about the future. Everyone's talking about threats. Everyone's talking, doomsday stuff here. Okay, you preserve something by you can put it in a building in a bomb shelter or whatever, and it can be sealed away. But you preserve these genuine, loving, amazing things by living it out, by continue living it, and by understanding who you are and what it is, understanding the context and the significance of these things. And I felt it was very important to keep that going with the young people, because I don't think we're necessarily seeing that happen. Inevitably.
Well, I have to tell you something kind of terrible.
Yeah. So I hope that clarifies the whole.
Well, you're clarifying it. But I'm going to say this because I can always cut it out if I want. I know you talk about the onion. You're talking about Putin, who contains. You peel it away, and he's got the core of what is Russia. But I don't think we have anybody in a leadership position right now in the Myrtle Beach Baba community that has that. Okay? I don't think Barbara does at all. I think that she sort of found herself working on the center, and she was a little bewildered, and she's just done the best she can as a mom given that role. Buzz, I don't know anybody who's been able to tell me, well, what is his story, and tell me a Baba story. I hear a Wendy story, and I hear an Elizabeth story. And he may have, in his onion, there may be something about Elizabeth, but I don't get it. That's the thing you're talking about, which is the thing like what we got from the Mandali. and our fathers.
Yeah.
That deep reverential sense for Meher Baba, especially his words and his teachings and his cosmology, and the Mandali. And call that what you want. I don't see that, and that's why I don't think there is anybody who could. I think you and I could, but we're not at this time in history. Maybe it'll change, but it might not. We're not seen that way, and we're not going to have those responsibilities.
Well, I wasn't, I wasn't speaking to necessarily, that we need.
Like you used the word "we," so I'm thinking of who's in the room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that the Baba world needs. Between you and I would love to hang out with Putin, and I would love to, I would love to, whatever, have him as a Baba Lord. But the point is that,
I think you'd have us all be wonderful, patriotic Russian Orthodox.
Orthodox. But the point is like, it may not, that sort of leadership is maybe not what is needed now. What I was speaking of is that it's more organic when it's a collective thing, when it's a natural thing from the people. When the generation has that moving forward. Now, sometimes it skips generations, sometimes, kids don't have it, and then, they live this life, and then, they have their Damascus Road conversion when they're 40 years old, and they, whatever. People are on different timelines and different trajectories.
If you go back not very far, there were people, they weren't leaders, okay, like a Buzz or a Barbara or somebody being a leader. But you take my father. You saw him, and you knew him. He did have this incredible heart quality with Baba and understanding intellectually, and and he could make it vast and open it up, and it's about art and it's about all kinds of things, and people respected him and they were sort of thrilled by him, and he did supply that. So it's not about leadership. I think you're right. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't need to be a Putin.
Yeah.
But you do need to have. You see, my father never was a leader, and I don't think your father was, except they were being on the board for a period of time. My father was never invited to. I mean, it wasn't what he was looking for. He was an artist. You lead through. You have to have certain people that have this core.
Yeah.
You called it the onion, but.
Well, I was talking about how.
And people will get it from them, but we don't have them that could appeal to the young.
Well, this is what I was speaking about. This is why when we were talking about culture, I was trying to bring up the reality of the day, and that the reality of the day, I think, is different than some of these people. Now, look.
Well, the reality of the day is kind of grim.
It depends on who's looking at it.
And you were trying to be.
I'm not trying to be negative at all.
No, I said you were trying to be hopeful.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be
but
negative.
I don't know what your hope is. I don't see a hope. I have great hope for the future.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's going to go. We're going to find out. Like, I believe Baba's advent's for real and all.
Yeah.
But right now, it looks kind of grim. I don't see people like my father.
And I'm familiar with your views. I mean, you have some very strong views.
Oh, right. About the future. About something's got to
Yeah.
give in the future.
Yes.
There's got to be an intellectual component to this, more than was needed in the past, because we don't have the Mandali and stuff. You talk about that cosmology. I actually think that's like the hub of this whole thing. At some point, that's what's gonna.
Well, we're going to see. It's going to be
jettison this.
It's going to be fascinating. I mean, I don't presume to know what the hell is going to happen one way or another. But I would say that regardless of whatever happens, and this really speaks to my point, is that when people have a very good understanding of who they are in their relationship with Meher Baba, that devotion of like, that unwaverable strength is important, and that's important to model and to use as an example, a lot of these kids don't have those examples. You know, the examples of the
No, I don't
world
think they
are
do.
very confusing.
No,
for
I
them.
think that's what I'm trying to
You
say,
know?
that these, when the older, once young, once
Yes.
in their 20s, Baba people came here, when I was very small and you weren't born yet, they had Elizabeth, Kitty, my father, Jane Haynes, Fred Winterfeld, Ella, I mean, there's more. I mean, go back and there was Ruth White, who Baba called his old soldier. They were, even though those people were old, they had this sort of living example. And
And
they
that's
had-
why it's important for it to be genuine. It has
they-
to be genuine.
We
It
we
can't be
can't
something that can
recreate
be.
that for our children.
It's not about recreating it, and it's not like
Just
about
what I-
a Sunday school. It's
No,
about
we definitely don't want that.
it's about living it, and it's
Thanks
about
very
giving
much.
opportunities for young people to experience it and living it, and giving them some mentoring. You know, I mean, Joseph Campbell. Pick up a Joseph Campbell book, and you'll see that, you know, how bonding actually happens. Does it happen sitting around in a discussion group? Do young men bond around, sitting around with a bunch of girls, and you know they're you know noticing their short shorts and you know this and that? I mean, it's hard. It's easy to get distracted. You see what I'm saying?
You know, a lot of little Baba cults started with
Yeah.
this idea of mentoring, though. The Society for Mayor Baba.
Absolutely.
Don Stevens had a little cult
Yeah.
going. Bal had a thing going.
I don't mean mentoring in a creepy cultish way. I mean
No, I don't even think that those things are necessarily
Yeah.
bad.
No, I'm not speaking to
But
those,
it's
but
funny.
I'm just saying.
Just came to mind.
Yeah, I don't want to say that that is you know that the idea of a leader or someone in charge to dictate this or that. No. I'm suggesting that that we you know, you have a bunch of people sitting around saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We have this money, or we have this time, or we have this energy. Where do we put it? And my simple point was, let's live it. Let's live it.
What does that mean? That's so too vague for me. So make it clearer.
Well,
I mean,
for-
let's live it. Well, who's let's? So it sounds like we should live. Who? You and me?
Okay, for
Like,
example, if you go
live
to,
what? You know,
Live
I'm living. I don't know,
Okay, that's
live
true.
what?
You are living. We're both
So you
living.
need to clarify more.
Okay,
I don't
okay,
know
fine.
what it means.
So you go to India nowadays, and or you go, it's very much. There are not a lot of opportunities to participate in much. Okay, you can go, and you can sort of take a look at.
You mean in the Indian Baba communities you're talking?
Yeah, I'm
Well,
saying
don't you
within.
go to like pujas and things and something
No,
like
I'm
that?
talking about I'm going to
even-
Mehrabad and going
even
to
Mehrabad, it's not
Yeah.
called puja, but the artis.
Artis, yeah, you go to Artis, and you know there's the meal times.
But you
and
don't
there's-
participate.
But there's not much participation. You know, the
If
Mandalay
you're
Lawn.
an Indian.
Yeah, well, in general, if you're a
Oh,
Westerner, you would go
I
to
didn't know that.
Marazad, and it's sort of like a museum experience now.
Yeah.
And people are sort of, you know, sort of trying to relive these things. And everyone said, well, Baba, you know, Baba's in the individual now. You know, it's you go and you know spend time at the Samadhi, or you go to Baba's room and you bow down and you do these things. There's not that many opportunities to participate in discussion,
Oh, so it's not just
in
here
debate,
where there's
in
not
service,
that. It's
in
there too.
service.
In service. Well, I don't like doing service.
Well, some people don't like. That's what I'm saying. There are many different. It's not diverse. You don't actually have those.
Let me say that again. I don't like doing service when it's organized by somebody else. I have the service that I do. I take my
Yeah.
nephew out. I know that you also do service that's not organized by me or anyone at the center or the Circle Center. But you.
But you see, those
figure it out.
opportunities for organic service are far and few between, because what a lot of people are looking at now as this transition happens is how do we organize? Okay, well, we organize by creating committees. We organize by creating more bureaucracy, by you know making the boards bigger or stronger, or you know raising more money, or these sorts of things. Now, all of that might be exactly what's needed, but what might also be needed, and to help balance that, is some organic spontaneity, where people can participate, new people are injected into positions of authority. You know, my father, when he came,
Are
granted,
you
he
sort
was-
of lobbying for young people to be given more positions of authority? say,
No,
through the
I'm
mayor,
not,
senator?
I'm
Okay,
not,
well,
because
some people
I
think that.
don't even, it's not about young people.
Some people will go,
No, I'm not one of
Ben
those-
is really
Absolutely
wanting to be on the board, or something like that.
Oh, God, no. I don't, first of all, I don't,
Personally, I'm not that kind.
no, I am not, this is not about me or my role
Or
in
even,
the Bible world, or any of my
or even,
contemporaries.
okay.
No, this is not about that. This is
Oh,
about.
Well, then I do
Yeah.
find it a little hard to understand what
Okay.
you're trying to convey, which,
What I'm talking about is allowing. I'll give you an example. My father came here when he was a young man.
Mhm.
He was living in Myrtle Beach at the time, and heard about Meher Baba,
Mhm.
and showed up and was a mess.
Mhm.
Yeah, the guy was a mess,
Mhm.
and we all know the story. Most people know the story. I'm not going to retell it, of Jane Haynes and my father showing up at her doorstep. But the point was soon after that, he was thrusted in to the world here, which was the Meher Baba world, and given authority and given responsibility. I should say responsibility is really the key. He was given responsibility to participate, and his voice mattered. And what we don't see now in the Baba world is we see the authority figures here, and we see the people participating here. And we don't see new people being able to
well, then
come
you
in.
are sort of talking about what I just said. You are like arguing for the opening of this culture to a new generation of leaders.
Well, you open it up, and simultaneously you allow, as I said, the best of that culture to transmit to them. It's both. It's simultaneous. It has to happen.
The best of what culture?
The best of our
meant to do.
culture, the best of our Baba culture, the best of the stories, the best of
We don't really have one left. I mean, what I saw as the Baba culture, I mean, I'm just telling you my opinion then. My mother and father, when they were very awake and doing teas,
Yeah.
and people going there and seeing the tour of Dad's paintings and hearing him give a talk every time they come.
Yeah.
I mean, several days a week in the 70s.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That was culture.
That was
really was culture. And then you had to
Yeah.
go and meet Elizabeth or Kitty, and she would ask them questions, and they sort of, she was so interested in their life and they would come back to Kitty.
Yeah.
Many people like Lori Bloom and stuff. People who really respected her. That they were participating in that way. That was a culture. There was a culture. There was a lot of that. It was people.
Yeah.
The people were the culture, what they had is sort of a shared memory of Meher Baba, who was the center of that culture. He's like the sun, and these are like these stars. But now it's like the stars have gone out.
Yeah.
Because I think that's sort of why the Meher Center has considered not having the teas at the original kitchen anymore, because it's people like me and Bob Underwood and David Barrison, all of whom were at the 69 Darshan, but we're just not like stars.
Bunch of misfits, basically.
We're kind of, yeah.
Yeah, a
I
bunch
mean,
of
we definitely, we have our own memory of that culture.
Yeah.
Okay, but when somebody new comes down to the benches, near the original kitchen, and this has happened, and I've watched it happen, we don't do so good.
Yeah.
And if it's a younger person, we do even worse. I mean, we're trying, okay? We really, really mean the best. I mean, we 100% want to go, wow, you're new, this is your first time at the center. But we just aren't, we're not Kitty Dave, we're not Elizabeth Patterson.
Yeah.
Or not, definitely not Erich
Yeah.
and Mansari.
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but we're kind of like a burned out once was. Like that religion I'm always comparing this to, the one where it was all old ladies by the end, the Shakers.
The Shakers, yes, they died off, yeah.
I don't know that they'd really, by the time you're like that, a few old ladies, you don't really have the Shaker culture anymore.
Yeah.
If somebody's really interested, you can talk about it.
Yeah.
But you can't bring them in.
Well, you're talking about having a lot of older people sitting around. You're talking about a geriatric community,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. You got to have real diversity. You got to have an enthusiastic, or if not enthusiastic, you've got to have a lot of young men. You've got to have a lot of, young men help to protect the place physically.
So they have that.
Well, they need more. They need more young men.
Yeah,
They
but
need,
that's not culture. That's
Yeah.
just guards.
no, but they need young people participating in both taking on the culture that has existed and being able to pass that
Well,
on.
do you think
And that's
that,
happening, but in very small amounts.
No, I
Very, very small amounts.
I don't even know of an example of it.
Yeah.
Where somebody, okay, when your father came, can you just take a stab at guessing? I could guess actually how old he was in 1966 when he showed up. Let's see, 1966. He was probably born in 1946.
He was born in 44.
Okay, so he's 22.
Yeah.
So name a 22-year-old being invited in that way to participate. No, it doesn't happen. That's my daughter's age.
Yeah.
No, nothing.
Yeah, and that's a result of a lot of things. But it's
Could it be a
Yeah.
result because they don't trust what they would do?
part.
And could that be partly maybe justified? Or not?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of that is I would have a hard time,
Picking 5 kids. that do that.
trusting many 22-year-olds. But that's where that authentic thing happens, where people come and they have these authentic experiences, and they are sincere, at least in trying to say, listen, in my father's case, he was a mess. He had, done a lot of drugs. He had lived a life that he wanted to change, and
they had the intuition to see that.
they had the intuition that, hey, listen, this guy means well.
They could have picked the wrong person.
Yeah, they
I mean,
could
there
have
are
picked-
people that we know
Yeah.
that were his age that would have been the wrong person.
And there were wrong people. We know the wrong people
That came at that same time.
that came at the
Mark
wrong-
Brosgel came not long after that, and he wouldn't have been
But
the right-
those people don't last. They don't make it.
Mhm.
And so you have to be able to pass on varying degrees of
By
responsibility.
the way, they
to
did the
people.
same with Barbara. Barbara
Yeah.
also just
Barbara also
was
did,
cleaning cabins originally.
And again, this is not about young people. It's not some
Well,
blanket young people
there
thing. But
are-
this is
there
about
is
how
a-
you
there is a
transmit
thing where-
responsibility and culture.
Where, okay,
If you
it's a
keep-
unique thing. It's a very unique
Yeah.
thing for a tiny demographic in age, and also a demographic in a few other things like middle class, white, other things. But this born 1945, 1950 demographic, East Coast,
Yeah.
middle class, that really doesn't trust anybody outside of that demographic.
Sure.
They respected people outside of certain people, but it doesn't get passed down. Now, you take Putin. Boris Yeltsin knew he was dying, and he was kind of like seen as kind of like the young. I mean, the Soviet Union was really old. My dad pointed that out to me when I was a kid in the
Yeah.
70s. He said, "See those people? That's it. They don't have." Those people they're nobody under 80.
Well, who wanted
But
to be,
then they
just
would-
looking at them,
but
you see a
then
bunch of old people
You
who
see,
wanted to be part
Putin
of
was
that,
like
yeah.
45 years old,
Yeah.
like your age.
Yeah.
Okay, and that very old dying Boris Yeltsin says, "Well, we have to pass this to younger, smarter people."
Yeah.
Young, smart people. That's really, I remember that line
Yeah.
really well. And everybody except it's funny because that is another exception. It would be the Soviet Politburo.
Yeah.
But they were like terrified of their own country.
Yeah.
So the last thing they want is anybody who's been doing any thinking since that last time they did, because they don't even know what those thoughts might be. That's actually an interesting parallel.
There's a lot of parallels.
And maybe you were afraid, but see, Boris Yeltsin was kind of a dick,
Yeah.
but he made that really inspired decision that we're going to pass this to the young.
But you see, Putin also faked it, part of it. Part of it, people didn't,
No.
the ruling elites did not, Putin had to play a certain game. He had to play the game where they thought, okay, this guy is going to sort of, he's ex-KGB, he's going to come in, he's going to, let the oligarchs maintain their factories, he's going to, let NATO.
Oh, you
approach
kind of
more
have to
and
seem
more.
old-fashioned? Is that what you're saying?
He had to not,
Act dramatic.
he couldn't reveal himself for who he was.
I bet your dad didn't either.
You had to play.
Initially.
Yeah,
Who knows? You weren't there. But, he might have tried to figure out what did they expect.
What did they expect?
Maybe I
Yeah.
need that.
And that's what, and that's how he
play the game.
he played the
first.
game, and that's how he got in that position.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you look at someone, even Kennedy, Kennedy, they thought when Kennedy came to power. I mean, look, a lot of people in
They were terrified of his youth.
in the deep state or the shadow government or whatever, the intelligence services thought a lot of people were terrified about him. But a lot of people said, listen, Kennedy is very controllable. The guy, he can't keep his weenie in his pants. He's his dad was look at where he comes from. His dad was a Nazi sympathizer, a drunk, a bootlegger, a corrupt guy. Kennedy is totally controllable, and he's part of the system. And what they found was when Kennedy came in, they found a guy who actually wanted to change things. He didn't like the current state of the Cold War. He wanted to change the Federal Reserve System. He saw what the powers that be were, and he wanted to change it. Now, one may disagree or agree, but to get to that position, he played by those rules. And Putin did very, very much the same thing. In Kennedy's sense, it was
They're
much
probably
more
about the
accelerated.
same age, by the way.
They may have been, yeah. In Kennedy's sense, it was much more, he had a very small window in which he could do stuff, and he attempted to do it, for better or for worse. Putin, on the other hand, has sort of gradually done this over the course of now, which is almost,
25 years. No?
well, in 2000, he took the oath of office.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then,
You're
of course,
right.
he wasn't in
No,
office
no,
for
no,
4
no,
years.
you're right. I don't know where I got that.
So we're looking at closer to 14
I'm
years.
including the 90s,
Yeah,
and that's right.
18 years in call it the bigger system. But, so, but to scale this back and to get into the context of our, sweet little Baba world here in Myrtle Beach, in our Baba family, in the greater, community in the world, I don't necessarily propose having that sort of leadership, but I do, if someone, in this case, in the case of that conversation, when someone asks me what I think, I'm going to say it's high time that we are not afraid to, to share responsibility and to keep things interactive, to bring
But you don't, when you
people
say
in.
responsibility, you don't mean responsibility over the management of the Mayor's Spiritual Center necessarily.
This is not. It's just not.
Because the Mayor's Center is not the Baba world.
Yeah.
And it's not the Baba movement.
No.
I mean, there is this center, and Dorina and Elizabeth wanted to have one, but it's not, who runs the center doesn't run the Baba world.
Yeah.
I always look at it, they just basically run a park. If they want to make dreams about what it is and everything, that's fine, but it's all happening on a park. Because
Well, here, I'll give you an example. Like here, you've recently had the young adult Sahabas, which I did not participate in.
I
but-
wanted you to.
Oh, you wanted
Remember,
me to,
I
yeah.
emailed you.
But
Because I wanted you to tell me, fill me in,
But I'm very busy. I don't have much.
No.
I don't have much free time in
Right.
my world right now to do things. But one thing that I would encourage whoever is making these decisions, and I speak with this in the kindness of heart, is I would encourage people to, you have people that are now, first of all, they're not young adults. A lot of these people are middle-aged. They're coming, and they're sitting around and they're doing a discussion group, just like they were doing when they were 25 years old, and just like they were doing when they were 15 years old at their youth houses.
Well,
And-
forget 25. You mean, unless they were workers.
Well-
You mean when they were
Yeah, I mean, people
15, 17?
15, 17, and then again, people will participate.
Oh, they'll
in
come
different-
and they'll be
They'll
on-
come and they'll
yeah.
go to some Baba event and there'll be a
Oh.
discussion group or something. What I'm saying is that these are not responsibility. People are not. They're not building something. They're not constructing
They're just
something.
talking, blah, blah,
They're just
blah.
talking. They're
Kind
just
of like the talk where this whole discussion began. The one
Exactly.
that you had at the Circle
Well,
Center.
this is why I was
Where
saying-
it was about the future, but it was just a blah, blah, blah.
It's a blah blah blah. There's a lot of blah blah blah, and no, there are magical things that can happen. People have experiences. I don't want to take away from. There are some good stuff that come out of discussion groups, but even that model of this sort of psychology based, let's sit around, let's talk about our feelings, because what is happening is and I've said this
That's
to you in
what
the past.
they do at the adult youth house,
Yeah.
psychology,
Well,
feelings.
it's what you feel about this or what And the thing is that what happens is that
Not what you feel about Baba, but literally what do you feel about this and what do you feel about that?
I can't speak to that. I wasn't at that
Right,
event.
okay.
But again, it's
Bullying.
Not, it's not necessarily
Gender.
It's not necessarily about passing on that culture. It's not necessarily someone saying, okay, this is how you do it, Chris. You're 15 years old and you're going through a tough time in your life. Here's some common sense, practical gems of how you survive that matrix out there, how you make it. Okay, that's not what's happening. What's happening is,
But I thought it should be something about Baba because you can get talks like that anywhere.
but that's coming from Baba. I'm saying with
With Baba. in it.
with Baba. That I would say.
Yeah, but you didn't say that, so it
Yeah.
could sound like, I can't remember names. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the context of Meher Baba, in the context of Mandali, in the context of the best of what that culture has to offer, that wisdom is available to the young, but it's not necessarily being given to them. In a
I don't
practical
know,
sense.
how is it available? The only place I see where it exists right now, that wisdom, is in the books.
Well, start.
With the books closed.
Well, then that's a perfect place to have a discussion group,
I think so.
or to have not even
I
a
think
discussion
so.
group, have someone actually just talk
I
about
think a
it.
youth Sahabas with a very in-depth discourse meeting would be fantastic.
That's a good idea. And you can have many different types of these things, and
Of
different.
course, I'm an intellectual in that
Yeah.
way. I'm like a book.
But that appeals to you, and discussion groups are going to,
I don't know where else it is though. I mean, I just don't think it's in the atmosphere of Buzz Connor and hanging with, talking about life with Barbara or something. That's the best of our culture. I mean,
Well, to credit both of them, I don't want to,
I'm not putting them down.
Yeah,
I just
I'm
don't
not-
see that as being like Elizabeth and my father, who were they just exuded Mayor Baba.
But
They just
that's not the
like
role.
Perfume.
That's not the role of Buzz and Barbara, and I don't think that they.
well,
I don't
I'm
think
just
that they-
saying
yeah.
then it's not. But I mean, I
Yeah.
don't see the answers
Yeah,
to life's questions.
yeah.
Right now, I'm saying it's locked up, but it's in those books. But it's not. You're not going unless you're talking about what's in those books. What are you doing at an adult youth Sahabas besides it's just. I mean,
You're saying-
I don't know what
Yeah.
the word spiritual means.
Yeah.
Okay, there's this idea that the center sort of stuff going to morph possibly from being a Meher Baba center to a spiritual. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either.
I just sort of means nothing.
Yeah.
Just opens up to, like for some people, health food is spiritual, and some people it's well, a lot of it yoga or something. But in Baba, that's not what he means.
Yeah. Well, Baba makes some very clear distinctions between. I mean, yoga is a perfect example. He makes those distinctions so that his followers are aware of how to get closer to him, how to obey him, how to, Baba and the Monolith were very practical people. You know, I mean, you know, Baba, yes, may have thrown curveballs a lot at people, but he also, you know, kept it pretty clean and simple for a lot of his devotees and followers to hold on to him, to obey him, to love him, to remember him, whatever you want to call it. And really just practical things about life that help people in life, help them to remember him, help them to
books
succeed
aren't,
in life.
you talk about, when I mention books, it sounds sort of like dry. Oh, books. Oh, that's bookish. But you've got whole movements that are based around people sitting around a book. So you got AA, which is the big book, which is, okay, you've got Christianity, which is the Bible, and you've got Course in Miracles, which is written by the CIA for those people. And then, well, you know, and it was, actually, you can look it up.
I know.
Okay.
I'm familiar with it.
But the stuff, the Quran, and then you got 1.5 billion people with that.
Yeah.
So, like at first I thought, books, what are you saying, Chris? But really, frankly, more than half the world is huddling around a book somewhere.
But a lot of people might say to you, Chris, people are, you know, some people aren't into books. They didn't come to Meher Baba by reading God
Well,
Speaks
they are in
Discourses.
grave error. Well, it didn't used to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like there was this thing that John Dennison used to do. And I really love John and Anita for some. Well, they're very close to my family.
Yeah.
And John used to have a God Speaks meeting.
I remember. Yeah, I
Okay.
remember.
And that's not something anybody's doing. My mother did that, and you know, like one person would come, two people. I know that Joyce Barrison went with her husband Howard, and they were the only ones there. And they had the meeting. My mom's just God Speaks meeting. The fact that those were not successful or anything. John Dennison's, I went to his with my dad, and it was me and my dad and John.
Yeah.
But the fact that people did that was part of the culture. That even was going on in Myrtle Beach. That John Dennison at his house had an open God Speaks meeting, and you could go. Still, I see that as something lost.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, you can relate things to. It doesn't have, you know, these things don't have to be lost. For example, you have, okay, in the 1960s, you had a lot of emphasis on drugs. Okay, 1960s, 70s. That is still there. The drug issue is a huge problem, and it exists within the Baba youth and all of that. That's all still there. But you also have these other issues which have become apparent, where gender confusion, for example, where you have, you know, all of a sudden you have whole, you have, you know, 100 people and 5 or 10 of them want to become the opposite sex, or they're taking drugs to change their gender, or they want to be, you know, they make up names like pansexual, any of these different things. So where did this come from? When I was in college, nobody knew about this stuff. No one was talking about it. Even up to 15 years ago, I was living in San Francisco, and I was living in a neighborhood where there was a bunch of trannies that lived down the street from me. They were prostitutes.
Yeah, but that's a different thing.
Okay.
That was the thing I wrote. I sent you an email about.
Okay.
The transvestites.
Transvestites. They were transvestites. But
And they've been around since ancient Greece.
yeah, they've been around since ancient Greek. But nobody was. Okay.
No, but that's a very different.
Yeah, this was.
They knew they were men, but they
2004,
like wearing women's
2005.
clothes, and maybe finding some.
Yeah, I mean, there was always cross-dressing.
Who was it?
People that.
Yeah, who was it? The FBI guy. J. Edgar Hoover was a cross-dresser. They say.
They say. So whatever, you know, cross-dressing. I mean, we all knew about it in high school.
But this
college.
new thing, no, I don't know where it came
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
You said
So-
where'd it come from, and I thought, I don't know, where'd it come from?
Well, you know, I lived right down the street from, you know, where there was.
Oh, in San Francisco?
Yeah, in San Francisco.
Well, so did I. I lived there, but before
yeah.
you. Yeah.
And.
I was probably there in the 80s. You were probably there in the 90s.
90s and zeros. But this was around 2004, 2005. And I remember talking to other people that were in the gay community in San Francisco. And first of all, this was on no one's radar. Nobody was talking about it. There were no issues. There was no movement. There was nothing. Because the fact is that it wasn't how many people percentage-wise were transitioning. It was a non-issue.
But it was going on.
But it was going, I mean, very, very, very
By the way, the
small
very
amounts.
first time I ever heard of it,
Very, very
I was
small
in
amounts.
India. It was 1980, and Bob Street read a newspaper from like New Times of India
Yeah,
to Padre
Yeah.
about somebody who had just gone this exchange operation. I think it might have been the first one.
Yeah.
And Padre just went. he just went, he just was horrified, and then he died shortly after
yeah.
that.
well, to me, I was just, hey, what, you got a few people work in the corner, they were basically prostitutes,
Yeah.
I'd walk by, they'd whistle
No,
at me,
yeah,
they try to,
yeah, I've always existed.
whistle, hey boy, come over. I didn't think one way or another about these people, and I try to love everyone, but what was interesting though, all that time I spent overseas, and then I come back, and all of a sudden the pressing issue of the world or our culture at that time, the United States was, kids' gender. Now
Yeah, when did it
10-year-olds
start?
want
I
to
mean,
become.
I only.
Yeah.
This seems like it happened since I got to Myrtle Beach 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's accelerated in a very, very fast way. Not
Where it's in the news constantly.
where it's in the news.
There was just a thing where this woman, I almost sent you the article, transsexual woman in a men's prison feels like a sex slave, but I didn't know whether the person was a man or a woman originally or what, and there's this controversy over Trump is going to possibly sign a bill that says you're the sex that you are biologically at birth, and
Yeah.
somebody got fired because they refused to vote against it in California at a college, and
It's
it's in the news.
I mean, I don't exist
It's
in that
the-
world. You don't exist.
I
in
don't
that
exist
world.
in that
And
world.
I'm not judging one thing or another.
I
but
do.
but it's become it's yeah. I do
I've
too.
got the
I do
quotes
too.
by Baba.
But here's
I'm
what I
gonna
would say.
eventually bring them here.
Is that this, for whatever reason, and we pretty much know the reasons why this is pushed on the young and so forth, but it's very much
We do.
pushed on-
Why is it pushed on the young?
Well, it's pushed on the young to confuse them, to break them down.
Oh, the
to-
cultural Marxism.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the-
all that stuff. I mean, that's a whole other
The viewer
conversation.
can look that up themselves.
Yeah, the Frankfurt School,
Frankfurt
all that,
School.
and the destruction of the family, and all this.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's right in the Communist Manifesto.
yeah,
The abolition of the family.
abolition of the family. But one thing that so this you've got all these Baba kids. You've got kids that are so many of these young people who are active in political organizations promoting
Right. You've told me.
one
that.
view.
I've
or
learned this
another.
from you.
One view or another.
Older ones. People in their
Older
38.
ones, younger
to
ones.
30.
You have. I mean,
Oh,
you
but
have.
you said in high places.
In
Are you
high
talking
places?
about- yeah.
Yeah, and doing things and and yet you do not have one conversation. You don't have a conversation going on with the young about gender and identity. Well, what did Mayor Baba say about it? So I'm saying that you see this where you have kids that grew up in Baba families who are active in the world, who are doing one thing or another, but they have no idea what Mayor Baba had said about that particular thing, and what they're doing may run not
Counter.
in sync. It may be counter to
It's
what
completely
Mayor Baba
counter. I mean, there is still up and
had said
down
about
in the
something.
world of duality.
and they don't even know. So you have a lot of issues above and beyond just drugs, above and beyond just sex.
Yes.
That this whole
Yes,
another
and that-
generation,
yeah.
which is bringing
Yeah,
to the table,
there's stuff
which is not being
beyond drugs
discussed.
and sex.
It's not being discussed in discussion
And
groups.
you haven't begun to talk about how race has become lunatic. I mean, people. My oldest friend, I'm not going to say who, my oldest friend, Baba Lover, older Baba Lover, called me up and started ranting about white men, which is a racist statement. I don't think like that. I mean, she should look it up in Wikipedia. The biologists think that basically the whole concept of race is biologically meaningful has been discarded as an error of the late 18th century. The whole, but there's like it's become it's reaching zealot levels of passion
Yeah.
this thing of race. So we used to have racism.
Yeah.
We got some, well, I don't even know what to call it.
Well, it's easy, and Baba spoke about this, how the ego gets attached to identity.
Oh, the identity politics
the
is
identity.
what we're talking. The gender is a form
Yeah.
of identity, and the
And
race.
we see that this is a rise, this is a new religion.
I'm a minority. I'm a persecuted group.
Well, it's the rise of the ego.
Yeah, and then people doing even these DNA tests to find out what their thing is, which I don't even think is real, because I could give examples of people who they knew where they were from, and
Yeah.
those things, those DNA tests put them in the wrong spot.
Oh, really? Well, it's.
But even the interest.
Yeah.
What difference does it make?
What
Whether
difference
it's
does it make?
really getting in.
Yeah, what difference
But so
does it
these are new problems. Anyway, I kind of got off where you were going. I just got interested in the problems.
No, I mean, it alludes to what I was saying, was that you have all.
But you were talking about having a conversation. See, I think to me, I'm suspicious of a conversation that doesn't have some kind of getting centered.
Yeah.
Like, for the Course in Miracles people, you can bring it back to the Course in Miracles
Yeah.
book. That's not my cup of tea, but I can see the value of that. Otherwise, you're just going to go into Never Land.
I don't disagree with you necessarily.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting I disagree with you. What I'm saying
That's
is,
what I'm worried about,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of stuff that's going on at the adult youth office, but I don't know.
I'm saying
I don't
that-
know
I'm saying that
they
there-
might be doing that.
I don't know, but it basically, the point is that what Meher Baba said and examples that were given are not being transmitted to these contemporary issues. Young people have a whole list of things that they're dealing with, above and beyond what the baby boomers dealt with. Okay, and
Okay.
they are, X, Y, and
It's
Z
way,
and all
way
these
beyond
things.
sex and drugs.
Way beyond sex and drugs and
Which
rebelling
is Baba
against your-
addressed sex and drugs because that was the last thing that was going
Yeah,
on.
way more what I would consider complicated. You don't have this discussion happening. Now, you can talk about how a discussion is supposed to take place, or one way, or this way, or that way. Okay, fine. You can debate that. But I'm saying this is not even part of it. So people are sort of showing up, and these Baba kids are not getting information one way or another. And that's something that I was trying to talk about
Well,
in that
you
group.
better not make this mistake with your own kid.
Well, I mean, it's.
Because we'll see, because he's still so young.
Yeah, I
You're
don't.
gonna have to have
Well, I'm the beneficiary.
conversations.
I'm the beneficiary of, and this was something that I also mentioned during that.
By the way, I said that partly because my mind went thinking about my daughter,
Yeah.
and I thought, I could have done it better. I could have done even better. I did the best I could, but I didn't realize, I didn't know the world that Megan and I would be in right now when she was 8 years old. That was 15 years ago.
Well, you
I
do the best you
couldn't.
can.
Yeah, I
You do the
prepared
best you
her
can.
for what I knew about, and I did okay. But
Yeah.
when they really need a lot now, and we even need to think more about these problems because, as you point out, these are not even things we dealt with in high school.
Yeah, I mean, these things are not being talked about, they're not being addressed, and, you talk about, you talk about my family. I mean, I'm the beneficiary of somebody who, I married a woman from another country, and who had who brought a lot to me and helped me as a man become a better person. A lot of those values, that she helped to reinvigorate in my heart and bring out into the world. Values that I already had, but, allowed me to make something of them, call it that. And that happens all the time with different people in relationships, and hopefully these things happen. I mean, hopefully people get the opportunity to do it. But one thing I also brought up at that meeting was traditional values from the East. Is that?
Oh, that's right. That's the word you used.
Yeah, and I didn't mean just
You didn't say
specific.
family values. You said traditional values. Still, that sounds threatening to people because they think you mean send all the gays to Siberia.
No. I didn't mean in the CNN, New York Times, what their interpretation of what traditional
Right,
values are.
right, right.
I meant that we have at our disposal. We have this incredibly warm,
Well, I think of family
Yeah,
myself.
I think of family. I
That's
think
a-
of,
I actually kind of think of family and God.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, a lot of, like what the Christians say so well, that, you know, a family has to have God in the center, the husband and the wife need to sort of be facing Christ.
Yeah.
And anyway, the way they paint that in words, I'm sure in Islam, I hope they have that too. I feel that sounds like what Baba is saying to me.
Well, he's saying if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna sign up to do it, that's probably the wisest way to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's what's probably gonna get you closest to me. You know, keep you on the path and keep you clear of a lot of mischief and trouble. Because it's, you know, it's a zoo, it's easy to get into trouble. It's easy to make mistakes, we've all done it, you know, myself included. We've all made bad decisions one way or another.
You know, whatever, the world's gonna go on
Mhm.
from some, I don't know, there's so many ways it could go. It's probably not even anything we need to worry about, but it's worth talking about. Just, let me just wax a moment and think. One possibility is that Baba Movement 1, and then I've told you this over and over, you know, it just fades away through death. And the kids have a very slight memory of our parents' religion, and we went to the youth Sahavas, a few people. And then something happens, something new that we can't expect. The other one is the possibility that amongst people that we maybe even know, like my daughter, once they're older and established and married and doing well, they may take roles that we can't anticipate or even Sam when he's older.
Yeah.
But I don't, you and I may not have much to do with it.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
This isn't about me or you. This is about, you know, this conversation got,
We're leaving them what we have right now
Yeah.
by having this conversation, leaving this recording.
people are gonna find, and they do all the time, you know, people find their own relationship with God and they find their own relationship with Meher Baba. There's no, you know,
There's no one way.
there's no one way. And neither of us are suggesting that. I think, you know, what we're talking about is something different. What we're talking, at least what I'm trying to explain was based upon my comment of how to do the best we can at taking the best of what we have and allowing that to go forward, you know, into our kids, into our families, into our communities, into the outside world, you know.
You know, I actually did a little of that in raising Megan to a large extent it was conscious. I took Megan away from Myrtle Beach when she got born. When she turned 1, we left. And I did that on purpose. I didn't want to raise her around here. I didn't think it would be a good influence. And when I came back, it turned out I was right, because people that she would have been around had gotten very into drugs and things. So, and we're not really strong connected to Baba, surprisingly, in the Baba community. There was that little band of boys. There were about 10 of them, a whole bunch. They were all David's age,
Yeah.
my nephew's age. Anyway, I felt that my father had given me something really great. I don't even think I was quite sure what it was. I knew it was about Baba, you know, but I felt like it's something really, it's like a treasure. My father took so much interest in communicating everything he could to me. And then I wanted to do that with Megan. I had her. And I wanted to just give her what he gave me. And that included teaching her things he had taught me, and then One of the things that, especially Baba, like really giving her a rich, magical sense of Baba strong. And also, my father was very supportive of me. No matter what I did, he was behind me, and I wanted to repeat it because I felt so appreciative that my father was never against me, always my ally. And I think I did convey it because I see it in her. She's full of Baba.
Yeah.
She's so intelligent. But you do have to do that. But I guess you have to do it individually
Yeah.
because people aren't going to hand over their children to somebody. And maybe that's probably for the best. You know, in real traditions, things come down through the family. Anyway, that's a libertarian concept. And there's this thing, and to talk about Russia, it's in their new national anthem that was written after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The word, they kept the tune, they changed the lyrics eventually. I read the long Wikipedia article on it. It's the national anthem. And one of the most beautiful musically in the world. And one of the words is really touches me when I see it with the subtitles. And it's this passing of wisdom from ancestors.
Yeah.
It's right there in the anthem, the passing of wisdom.
Boy, it is, you know, this is a great opportunity. I mean, our life, we are so blessed at what we have at our disposal here. We have so much opportunity in terms of getting close to God and getting right with Meher Baba. And having that foundation with your family, having that foundation with that support and access to information or that wisdom, call it wisdom like you're saying, is so helpful. It is so helpful. And that's my intention, was just to pay homage to that component of the discussion. You know, people can choose to do with their life whatever they want to do. It's not for me to tell them what they, you know, what kind of life they should live. If they want to, you know, go one way, that's fine. They can go this way or that way, whatever. But I would hope that I would encourage them, because I would consider them part of my family as a Baba kid, as a Baba lover, as somebody who shares some of this same culture with me, that they would hope to take advantage of it as much as they can. That's it. That's it. Just as a friend and just as a family, I would try to love somebody with that level of respect. So that's it.
Okay. Well, then we're going to sum up, and that is the end of our talk. Thank you for coming, Ben, and see us next time on the Chris Odd Hour. Thanks for being with us. Okay. Turn it off.